Hey everyone, ready to dive in? We're going to unpack some really cool stuff today. Open source automated insulin delivery systems.
Yeah, DIY diabetes tech.
Exactly. We're talking like people taking control of their diabetes management in a whole new way.
And the best part, we've got actual research to back this up, not just hype.
For real.
Yeah.
Okay, so think insulin pumps, CGM, algorithms, all grooving together to automate insulin delivery.
Like a perfectly tuned band.
Totally. Sounds kind of futuristic, right?
But it's not sci-fi, it's happening right now.
It's really happening. And it's not even just about the tech itself. It's the communities forming around these systems, people sharing knowledge, pushing the boundaries.
It's like this ultimate diabetes hackathon, but with real-life impact.
For real. So to kick things off, we're diving into some real-world data from a study published in Diabetes Technology and Therapeutics. They followed over 500 people using the Loop system,
Which, and this is important, is one of the most popular open-source aid systems out there.
right? One of the big ones. And get this, 500 participants, adults and kids, using it daily for 6 months. That's a ton of data.
6 months of life happening, with Loop in the mix.
Exactly. Pizza parties, late-night study sessions, all of it. And what did they find? Okay, so time and range, that percentage where your blood sugar is happy, it increased by 6% on average.
Which I know might not sound huge, but in the diabetes world, it's massive.
It's huge. Fewer highs, fewer lows, fewer worries, more spontaneity, maybe fewer complications down the line.
I mean, imagine going for a run without freaking out about your blood sugar.
Or like actually enjoying a meal with friends without having to do calculus to figure out your insulin.
Exactly. It's about getting some of that mental bandwidth back, and actually living your life.
Yes. And here's another win. These benefits weren't limited by age or income. So this tech has the potential to be accessible to everyone, which is huge.
Really important point.
Okay, so we've talked time and range, but what about safety? These systems are literally managing insulin, so it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And the researchers knew that. They looked specifically at the rate of severe hypoglycemia, those scary low blood sugar episodes.
Ones that can really knock you on your butt.
Exactly. And the good news is they found a reduction in those events with Loop users.
Less chance of those scary lows.
Yeah.
That's huge for peace of mind, both for the person with diabetes and their loved ones.
It really highlights how these systems can improve not just blood sugar, but safety and quality of life too.
Okay, so things are looking pretty good for Loop so far, right? But hold on, there's another contender in the open source aid game, AndroidAPS. And our next source, an article from Diabetech, does this really interesting head-to-head comparison.
And it's not your typical face-off. We're talking about a study with pigs.
Pigs. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Why pigs?
Well, pigs actually have a really similar physiology to humans, especially when it comes to their pancreas and insulin production.
So they're like the ultimate test subjects for this kind of stuff.
You could say that. And in this study, the researchers wanted to see how Loop and AndroidAPS handled those blood sugar spikes after meals.
Ugh, those post-meal spikes, the worst. Every person with diabetes knows the feeling.
Right, exactly. And one difference between Loop and AndroidAPS is that AndroidAPS has some fancy features to handle those unexpected spikes.
They've got things like unannounced meals and super microbolus. Sounds like something out of a video game.
It does, but they're actually just really smart algorithms. They fine-tune insulin delivery based on your blood sugar and what it thinks you'll need, like a tiny little detective.
I love it. Okay, so back to the pigs. Tiny CGMs, pumps hooked up, they're chowing down. What happens?
The results were pretty interesting. The pigs on AndroidAPS had better time and range than the Loop pigs, especially after those meal challenges.
So does that mean AndroidAPS wins? Case closed.
Not so fast. It was a small study, and pigs aren't humans, no matter how much we might want them to be.
Right, true. But it does make you wonder why the difference, and how does that translate to real life for us humans dealing with diabetes?
Exactly, and that's where things get even more interesting. This same article mentions another study, the JABE study, looking at people using Loop.
Okay, so actual humans this time.
Yes, and here's the thing. Even with those pig study results, the Loop users in this other study said their quality of life was way better.
So we got pigs saying one thing and humans saying another. What are we supposed to do with that?
Well, it just shows that while the tech stuff is important, it's not everything. User experience matters, personal preference, how well it fits your life.
It's like picking between two amazing restaurants. One might be slightly tastier, but the other one has the vibe, your favorite server, you always have a good time there. It's about the whole experience.
Exactly. It's about finding what helps you live your best diabetes life, not just the fanciest algorithm.
So we've got these DIY systems, Loop and AndroidAPS, battling it out in the pig pen, showing real promise. But then there's the kind of research that makes even me pay attention, the kind published in those big deal medical journals.
Right, we're talking randomized controlled trials, the gold standard of medical research.
Exactly. And our final source today, it's a one-way ticket straight to one of those trials, the CREATE trial, published in, wait for it, the New England Journal of Medicine.
Yeah, if you know, you know.
The New England Journal of Medicine, that's like the Beyonce of medical journals.
Everyone knows it.
So what they do?
They wanted to really put open source aid systems to the test, compare them head to head with the usual care. They got almost 100 people with type 1 diabetes, adults and kids.
Okay, so we've got our players. What's the game plan?
They split them into two groups, totally random. One group got to use an open source system based on Android APS, but tweaked to be a super user-friendly just for the study.
Like a special research edition of Android APS?
Exactly. And the other group, the control group, they used what's called sensor-augmented pump therapy. That's basically an insulin pump and CGM working together, but no fancy automated adjustments.
Got it. Still high-tech, but missing that AI brainpower that makes aid systems unique.
Right. And what did they find? Well, the group using that open source aid system, they spent a whopping 3 hours and 21 minutes more each day in their target glucose range compared to the other group.
Whoa, hold on. An extra 3 hours in range every single day. What would you even do with that much time? I'd probably just stare at my CGM in shock.
It's a massive difference, truly, and get this, it held true for both kids and adults, which means open source aid has potential for pretty much everyone.
That's incredible. Was there anything different about how it worked for kids versus adults?
So they noticed the biggest improvements happened at night. Both groups, kids and adults, spent way more time in range overnight when they were using the open source aid.
Makes sense. Overnight is like the Wild West of blood sugar. You're asleep, not eating, your pancreas is off doing its own thing.
And for parents, knowing their kids' blood sugar is more stable at night, that's priceless.
Totally. Okay, but let's talk safety, because that's always top of mind, right? These are still fairly new technologies, and we're talking about insulin here.
Right, and the researchers were all over that. They were watching very carefully for any problems, especially hypoglycemia.
Any close calls? Anyone turn into Spider-Man from a rogue algorithm or anything?
No Spider-Man sightings, thankfully. Actually, they had 0, as in none, cases of severe hypoglycemia or DKA in either group, the open source group or the control group.
Okay, now that is reassuring. No hospital trips, no scary middle-of-the-night moments. That's a major win in my book.
Definitely a win. It wasn't all perfect, though. There were a few hiccups along the way.
Uh-oh, what happened? Spilled coffee on the algorithm?
Not quite. They did have some device deficiencies pop up, but these were mostly with the hardware itself, not the actual algorithm.
So like the insulin pump acting up or a sensor glitch, not the AI deciding to go rogue.
Yeah, more like that. And keep in mind, they were using some pre-production pumps that weren't even on the market yet, so those kinds of glitches are bound to happen.
True, true. It's like those first clunky cell phones, remember those? Every new tech has its quirks.
Exactly. The good news is they took care of the hardware issues and nothing serious happened.
That's a relief. So basically this CREATE trial, published in the super prestigious New England Journal of Medicine, gave open source aid systems a pretty glowing review. Glowing might be putting it lightly. This trial was huge for open source aid. But like you said, it's not one size fits all, right?
Right. It shows us just how powerful these systems can be. We're talking tighter control, less hypoglycemia, even a better quality of life.
Now, let's be real. There's a coolness factor, too.
Yeah.
Like you're part of this secret club of diabetes tech innovators.
Yeah. But even though the community is great, the most important thing is that you find the system that really works for you, for your life, and what you're comfortable with.
Totally. It's about your best diabetes life. Though, gotta be honest, we're not quite at the point where these systems are as common as, like, insulin pumps, right?
Yeah, there are definitely still some hurdles. Like right now, you kind of need to be tech savvy, and not everyone has access to the same support and resources.
It's that thing of needing a common language, you know? Like trying to explain the latest TikTok trend to someone who's still figuring out how to download an app.
And we need healthcare providers to catch up too. More doctors and nurses who really get this tech so they can support people.
Imagine trying to explain this to a doctor who's like, what is an app? It'd be like teaching them that TikTok dance.
Oh, exactly. But the good news is studies like this one, published in big journals like the New England Journal of Medicine, that gets their attention.
It's like we're shouting about open source aid from the rooftops. And finally, They're starting to listen.
And with that awareness comes more support, more funding, and hopefully someday, even things like regulatory approval.
Fingers crossed. So as we come up for air from this deep dive, what have we learned? Open source aid is showing incredible potential. Better blood sugars, fewer scary lows, a real shot at improving how we live with diabetes. But it's got to be the right fit for you.
And knowledge is power. The more you know about this stuff, the better choices you can make for your health.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So here's a thought to leave you with. If you were considering open source aid, what would matter most to you? What would make your life easier, less stressful, more fulfilling?
Keep those questions in mind as you keep learning.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, happy looping, and may your blood sugars always be in range.